Good evening, everybody. How are we this fine evening? It's Friday night. Just thought I'd jump on and do a little live talk about EQ because somebody was asking me about EQ today. So there's lots of ways that people EQ, and a lot of the time I see people kind of getting it wrong. And they get it wrong because of instances like they hear somebody say something and then they do it, but they do it too much. Okay. For example, creating a low cut. Creating a low cut to get rid of the rumble at the bottom. Yes, tick. But then what they do is they bring the low cut up and they take away the body. And people want to make vocals brighter and they just bring it up where there's sibilance and they just increase the sibilance even though it's brighter, but they struggle to be able to tune into that sibilance. And yeah, we want to be able to use EQ as the tool that it is without overdoing it. And that's a problem that I see most of the time. So what's the first thing we think about before EQ? Well, as anyone knows, good evening, Paul, we've got 20 hertz here and we've got 20K here. We've got the mid and we've got the sides. We've got the left, we've got the right, we've got forwards in the mix and backwards in the mix, controlled by EQ and reverb. So the key thing, first of all, is to making sure that you've got your sounds chosen for the position of the mix. So anyone who knows, who's worked with me knows we start with a lead. So if you've got a piano, get your piano right. Okay, what's the next lead? Oh, is it synth? Get your synth in to work with the piano. Then get your bass in. Okay, and so on and so on with levels of importance. And what you do is, like, if you've got a piano at, let's say, 1200 hertz, you want your synth really to be an octave up or an octave below, so that it's not fighting with it for the key frequencies of it. There's no rules, but a lot of people I see when they're choosing the sounds are doubling up in the same frequency, so they use two pianos, same like C3, and it's just getting phasey and messy because you've got two things virtually the same in the same frequency, clashing with each other. So the first thing is to choose the position in the mix, so that we're not, we all our elements are in the mix. The track sounds great. Your track should sound great, most of the time, just with the elements that we're putting in the mix. Because don't forget, we're using samples a lot of the time, or synths, that we can affect them or change them in a way which fit the mix better. So before we come to EQ, choose your sounds for the position of the mix. This also includes your hi-hats. A big mistake I see is people choosing hi-hats that are all in the same frequency. Choose a lower hat for like, say, the offbeat, and then a hi-hat for like the 16th pattern, or the shaker, have it really high or a different frequency, or vice versa. That's the key to it. Okay, the key to a great sounding mix, first of all, is by sample choice, positioning the frequency spectrum and choosing it so it's not clashing with anything else. Okay, so what's the next thing that we do? Okay, so this is a track I've mixed, but what I do is I get my track in and I will try and look at EQ once everything is in. But the key thing that I'll do is I might take out rumble at the bottom of things, like a clap, like here, just take it out. And with this one, I wanted to make it less brighter. And I'll do that with everything else playing. So I'll get everything else in the mix. I might take a little bit at the bottom end, then I'll start EQing. Because the biggest mistake I see people make, is people EQ in isolation. Okay, so it might sound good in isolation. You might take out a bit of that stuff at the bottom end you don't really need. But the fact of the matter is, with everything else playing, a lot of the time, it's those frequencies that kind of glue it to the track or give it a bit of body or something in the mix. And that's the key. EQing is about doing things to everything else in the mix a lot of the time, unless we're trying to remove something. So what's the first thing I do? The first thing I'll do is I'll get a sound. Let's just say this chord stab. Take off that. And I'll listen to it. Okay, so the first thing I'll do it dry, so it's nothing's hiding anything on it, right? And then I'll get a FabFilter Pro Q4 and go to the sound, and I'll turn the analyzer off. Well, I don't, but turn the analyzer. If you don't use your ears, don't use your eyes. Sorry, try and use your ears. So what I'll do is I'll go. Okay, I'm up to 215. I can hear a little bit of the bottom end going out. I'm wearing headphones, so you'll have to, if you're listening on good speakers, then yeah, it's 'cause I'm not listening on my big speakers. And then what I'll do is I'll take it back. Okay, so I'll notice about 215. And then what I'll do is every sound, or well, if you train your ears, go through it and just listen to see if there's anything that's nasty or you don't want in there. And again, always do this very broad, right? So if you're still learning, do the same as this from the top, but just turn it off, because a lot of the time that air that's on sound is gluing your track together. So yeah, so I'll do that. And then I'll probably take this back. I'd find that there's a sweet spot, then I'll take it back a little bit. Okay. So I've got the synth, and then I've put everything on there that I might want to do. I'll listen to how it sits in the mix. And then what I'll do is I'll play it in the track. Okay. So if I've done this at the beginning of the track and now I'm at the end, I'll go through the EQ because I know, oh, I need a bit more body in that synth, or oh yeah, it's a bit dark, or it's a bit bright, or whatever. I can hear and automatically go straight away. Ah, right, okay, yeah, better do that. But the way I trained myself and learned with other people is to do it in the mix and just go through and see if you can bring anything out or take anything away. There's a little bit of something there I can take out. Is it making a big difference? Not really, but that's the area where there's sometimes quite a bit of mud. It sounds better on and off in the mix. And then I'll mess around with the bottom end. So I was losing the body there a bit. I really wanted to punch through. Don't be afraid of having something down here. We can always put a side chain on something if you really need it. So let's look at the analyzer, what that's saying. So we can see there we have got a key note pushing through. So yeah, that sounds really good. So that's what I do first of all. Okay. And I do that with almost every sound. At the beginning, I'll take it through just a bit of bottom end if that's what I need it. And then I fit it in the mix with everything else, because I have found a lot of the time when I go to people's projects, and I used to do this for mine. I'll go through the track. That when I turn off the EQ, even though what they've done makes total sense, they've just taken a bit too much out of the body, or they've boosted it. It's not really helped. So, like, I'm going to touch on this briefly. So that's how I automatically think about EQ. First of all, choose the right sounds for the position in the mix. And then I'll EQ basics at the beginning, looking for stuff in isolation that I might not want. Okay. And then when I've got everything in the track, listen to it, because sometimes, you know, those frequencies just kind of gel your mix together. You don't want to take stuff out for the sake of just taking out. The bottom end is a little bit different because we've got these big subwoofers. We're making music for clubs. So the rumble and all that kind of stuff, I don't want in the bottom end. So that leads on to low cut. So low cut, you know, everybody wants to low cut. We do it all the time. What's the problem with low cut? Okay. Well, there's no problem with it. But if you mix it for loudness, it can create phase issues, okay? So let's go look at my kick. On here. Okay, so I've got this. Let's look at the level of the kick. 8.94. Okay. So we'll go back to the slope in a second, but let's just turn this EQ off. 8.94. 8.63. So in this instance, right, it's actually reduced the volume. Let's turn this one off first of all. So yeah, it's taken down the volume of it. Okay. Let's turn it back on. Okay, right. I'm going to move this EQ, and I want you to, if you can see it, in fact, I'll say it to you. So we're 8.94, and I'm going to move this up the frequency. Okay, so in this instance, I'm EQing it and it's not changing the volume. So sometimes what that will do is, this obviously creates a bit of a phase shift here. And as we move up, it boosts the level here. Now, a lot of people who come into me, they will go, oh no, I don't want to low cut the kick because it creates a phase shift and makes it louder. Sometimes there's no rules, try it. Okay. What I've done is I've got this in the mix. Okay. And I've EQ'd this in the mix to what sounds best in the mix, right? Again, sometimes I cut the low end out of the kick. It sounds great. It sounds tight, you know, but then I listen in the mix later on and I go, oh, it just needs a little something further down. And I move it back a little bit with everything playing, and suddenly I've got a bit more thump on the bottom end. So that's the other thing about EQ is with the low cut, you've got to use your eyes. So check your meters if you're mixing for loudness. But for me, the most important thing when it comes to EQ is how it sounds, right? And how it sounds in relationship to everything else. Now, don't do this. Now, what some people will do, they'll watch this video and they'll say, all right, 20 hertz, 36 dB with the kick, low cut. I'm going to start doing that because that track sounded great. No, it doesn't. I don't use the same every single time. I've done this in the mix. So what do I do? Okay. I'll get a low cut. It's a bit harder for me because I'm working in my headphones, but I'll find at the point where it sounds right and bring it back a little bit, okay? And go back forwards too much and then come back. And that's a good way of starting to tune yourself into your EQ. Don't just go to the point, bring it back a little bit and then turn it on and off in the mix. So go back to that. And that's how I do it, right? So I might do it at the beginning, but I'll always go back to the end, to the EQs, and look at the important things to see what they're doing. Okay. Now, nowadays, I generally only use EQ for cuts, uh, finding things I want to take away, a bit of dynamics. So like if they've got sibilance up here between 5 and 8K around there, I might use it for that. I might use some dynamic EQ to bring it down when the kick's in or something else like that. But this is just what I do. I do use EQ, but I'll always try Spectre next. So it's not an EQ. This is a parallel saturation, okay? And I've got my track together, and what I've done is I've listened to the track and I've thought the kick needs a little something. I don't know what it is because my ears aren't trained or your ears aren't trained. So what I do is this. I go, okay. And I go there. To be honest with you, it sounded quite good up there, just around 3K as well. So what I'm doing is I'm adding harmonics to that place there. So we're at 50%. And then I might choose the one that I go for. I usually go for tube, or want it to be a bit more drastic, then I'll go for tape. And then I'll change the subtle mode here. So this is EQ. So you've got to remember mixing is all about levels. That's what it's all about, okay? It's all about volume. So we're just boosting volume in different areas or taking away. Now, I'm not saying this is the right way to do it, okay? And if I want something just to be a bit more subtle, I'll definitely use an EQ, okay? But I'm loving Spectre at the moment, and there's all the different types, and it generally works for me in my tracks. And I think it just creates a more definite sound. And so, yeah, so that's what I do. So I do that with all the sounds. I go through it. And when the mix is together, I'll then start mixing. So I have mixed on the way because I've chosen the right sounds, done a bit of balancing and EQ here and there. And if something drastically needed something, I'd do it. And then I go into the track, you know, and I'll EQ it. So for example, let's have a look at this. I've got my track. I've done this right at the very end, and I've thought, right, it's not cutting through in the mix, okay? The other thing was, this is going to work, is tonal balance, which is a plugin. It's really good for helping you see how the tonal balance of your track is. So let's have a look at this. It looks okay. The bass is okay. That's okay. That is okay now, but it wasn't before. I know I had to do a few boosts, right? To boost that energy there in the mid-range. And you've got to remember that the magic is in the mid-range. Hi, Paul. Hi, Dan. Hi, Enoch. Hi, RDH. Hope you're all good tonight. Thank you for joining us. Any questions, just let me know in the chat. So EQ is secondary to sample choice, okay? I then like to use this Spectre. It is amazing. I just find it easy to use. And the reason why I use Pro Q4 is because I don't like Ableton EQ. But if you're using Cubase or Logic, sometimes it's a bit easier to use. So I can change the Q, everything just with my fingers on my pad. So there's that. Okay, so choose the right sounds, EQ it, try and just do negative EQ. That's what I do most of the time. And when I've got everything together, if I think the track needs something, I'll go in and I'll use Spectre. You know, whilst you're training your ears, it might be helpful to just bring up Spectre, give it a little boost wide and move up and down the frequency range on the sound and see if your mix sounds better. See, the key is this. Nothing matters in isolation, right? All that matters is how it sounds in the mix. And what people don't understand is taking away stuff in isolation can damage your mix. When you glue your track together, the reverbs help to glue the track together. The saturation and the harmonics help to glue your track together. And then you put a compressor on that or a limiter or something else, and that joins it all together. And sometimes by taking stuff out, okay, in isolation, you can just kind of, your mix isn't quite there. And I see it sometimes. So just be very mindful about that. If you're learning, go back to the start of the track. When you've got everything in, you think it's finished, go in and turn every plugin on and off. Okay, we were talking about whole mixes there. So let's just have a look at this. So this is another thing that I do quite a lot. If you've got Metric AB, go to Spectrum, go to Layered, and reference your references and look at it. I can see theirs is a bit brighter at the top end. Bottom end's good. I like the bottom end. Everything else seems to be okay. And I'm happy with the mix. Then what I'll do is I'll A/B the track, which I can't do, and see how it sounds. Remember, what you see isn't always how it sounds. Okay? And they're tools for helping you. And the visualizer on like Pro Q4 is really good and it's really helpful. But I would say to you, don't use the analyzer. Just try and teach your ears. Honestly, you'll come along, excuse me, leaps and bounds. But if you want to do it without analyzer first, then use analyzer, that might help you. It's there to help you. So, RDH, do you mix levels at a certain point or as you're going along mix? Okay, so we talked about this the other night basically, but I use analog emulations. So what I'll do is I'll have an analog emulations. I'm not on this one. I haven't got one on there, but what I normally have is like a Shadow Hills. And I'll just start like this. Okay, so 4-1, slow attack, fast release. Okay, and then I'll just get it. So the kick's hitting 1. I've got my analog emulations, so I'll go into that. I'll get that to 1, okay, and that'll be my levels. So I'll obviously have the fade up at 0, and I'll use the plugin to drive it into that, so it's -1. But obviously in this case, I'm just showing you, so I've used the threshold, which is quite a lot. I usually have the threshold about 9. That's how it'll start, and I want it pushing it around there. And then I'll mix my levels into it. And then I'll have that within the groups, and then I'll go to the main. And what I'll do is I'll have a gain or an ozone doing nothing, and I'll push the levels into that just so they're hitting 0. So everything that I'm adding, I can hear any distortion that's happening at the master bus. Okay, mixing for loudness. I'm not going to talk about that now because that's in my whole course that I'm doing now. If you've been watching that, thank you. I'm back on it next week. I've been really ill. I've been really ill, but I've been ill. So, yes, that's mixing for loudness. It's not about EQ, which is what tonight's all about. Okay, so what can we do? So what can I recommend? One thing that I did was this. Okay, when I started, let's say I've got this middle loop. So I get this loop. What I did at the beginning was I found an EQ that I really liked, but a channel strip. Okay. And why a channel strip's really good? So good because you're not using your eyes as much. So I was using the SSL-J. Okay. And it's a good one, this, because let's just say every sound you get, you just got to try and use it. Okay, so this is your low cut, you got your high cut. Find the level. Obviously, I'm working headphones. Same with the top. But do it in the mix, okay? And then I might go, okay, let me just try a bit of compression here. Level match. And just try a bit of compression on everything and learn what it sounds like. It's only simple, but there you've got. There you go. You just go through it and just try it. And then you've got your EQ. So I just mess around with these. Okay, that sounds good, okay, but it's too much. And I'll be listening in the mix, and so on and so on and so on. So even though you're using the numbers, yeah, you're not seeing like the harmonics and everything else jumping up in the EQ, right? So you think, oh, I need to boost there. And I know that's what people do. What you're doing is you're using your ears, and then this is really good because you're learning the frequencies of, oh, that sounds good. That sounds good on a percussive clap or frequency, and you'll learn them kind of frequencies. And this is the key to being great at choosing sounds and mixing, is being able to identify frequencies, you know, and then mess around with the EQs. You're not using your eyes. It's how they used to do it in the old days. So if all the top people use desks, like, why not? The visualizers are there to help you, and they do help you when you're starting. But honestly, the key is to training your ears. Everything's about training your ears, okay? Good thing about this is you've then got a boost. So like if I really do this on a kick, while we're looking at it, I'll just do it. Try a bit of compression. Oh, I really like that. So you can either bring back the threshold, or back in the day, a trick that someone taught me was fine, or go back to where your frequency is. Do it in the track, obviously with my headphones, in the mix, turn it on off. Obviously that's distorting. Level match. And then it's great. It's a great way of teaching your ears without using your eyes, even though you can see the numbers to learn frequencies and remember what frequencies are. So remember, if we like listen to the kick, and we're here. You go, oh, I don't like that. And do it that way. And then what you're doing is you're not just training your ears for the frequencies, you're training your ears for the cue of the EQ. So that's a really, really, really good way to start training your ears with EQ. And again, I wouldn't be doing like this, I'll be doing like this. I can't hear the bottom end properly, but it sounds better. The top end of the kick's kicking through a little bit. And what's that because? That's because of compression. We've not EQ'd the top end, remember. All we've done is compressed it and then boosted back in the bottom end. It's just showing you a little advanced trick. But one of my mentors, he says it was the SSL EQ. I used SSLs a couple of times, but I was always kind of virtually in the box. And they didn't really have a lot of SSL EQs at Manchester, and the ones in London were expensive to use when I was learning. So yeah, so that's the way to use EQ. The key is to try using your ears, and the key thing is to try trust your ears. So that's the next thing. The next thing is like, okay, like, we're doing it, and it takes ages. And I only did it a couple of years ago when I was doubting myself, but then I just sit back and go, is it better? Is it worse? And you've got to sit back and you've got to do it. And the key to being a great mix engineer and producer is trusting yourself, trusting that what you're doing is right. Because after a certain stage, most of you will be able to tell the difference. Okay. So that's the SSL. So that's how I use EQ. It's quite simple, mostly subtractive. Sometimes a boost if I want something, just a level boosting or something like that. I think, was it on the chord stab? Obviously, I've used it for movement. On the acid, I've just taken out some mud there, and that's it. I don't use loads of it. Pads, as you can see, I've just given it a little boost. That would have been in the mix. I've not even put anything on it. I should have done, really. Finish this track yet. This, I've not put anything on it. And the thing is, I'm not hearing it that it needs it, but I will be going into these. Let's for example, go into this. In the mix. I'll always take out the rumble. I do always do it, but let's have a look at what the numbers are there. The minus 8.2. So again, it was louder if that wasn't hitting the LFO. Take the LFO off. That's changing the frequency. Minus 7.94. Minus 7.87. So it's reducing the volume a little bit. So in that case, it is, and I'll just use my ears. Yeah, I would always use that. I want to use something steeper, so I would definitely use the Pro Q4. It is a better EQ. So yeah, so that's it. And I go through the mix and I carve it out. The least amount of stuff in the bottom end, the better, because we are making music for clubs. Subwoofers are massive, and we want the kick to punch through. So I want the least amount of possible in there. You can go straight to your music bus or any of your buses and do it there. Obviously, I've done it there with a low shelf. What I would have done is I would have tried it with a low cut. It would have been boosting the levels, okay, because I'm always mixing for loudness, and then tried the shelf and I got a better result there. I've not finished mixing this yet. Let's just say, let me show you on the mix bus, on the percussion. So I would remove that rumble automatically, and then I'd probably do that without the music on. It's hard for me to make an informed decision because I'm not listening to the speaker. So take out whatever I've got. Do you know what I mean? I've EQ'd everything else separately. They all work together. I wouldn't necessarily do something there. All I'd probably do on the percussion bus is add a bit of compression like we've got there. So just to talk about compression quickly, which I'm going to go into, I would mix into it. Then I'd go into it and shape the attack and release to work with the track with everything in. I don't just put something on and then leave it there. So that's EQ. That's how I do my EQ. Right, let's look at a couple of the EQs and what people say. Okay, so why do we use analog EQs? Right, so analog EQs, they create character. And I was having a conversation with somebody who doesn't use analog emulations, and they were saying, because our music is so busy, you don't necessarily hear that saturation or noise that comes through. And because lots of other producers aren't using those plugins, you know, they're just making it with stock EQs, you know, it's not a sound of electronic music. But I know a lot of people that use them. I think they do add things. I think when you add something like a Shadows Hill, what it does is it's the saturation it adds that glues it together, not just the compression. And it's a tone. I mean, let's have a listen to that on and off. I'll just push it. So listen to extreme to see how it's doing it the most. Obviously, I've gone to turn that up before and there was no kick in there. So, yeah, sometimes my kick goes to, we have a joint bus. So what I would do is this. I would and bring it back. Try and get the gain about right. And then turn it on and off in the mix. Now, this is the key thing to it. I mean, this is a compressor, not an EQ. But what's it doing to it besides the compression? What's the tone like? Is it nice? Is it not nice? Is it gorgeous? It does add like a kind of glue to it, which just makes it so everything's not just popping out a little bit too much. It's hitting those like the cowbell. Just bring it down a little bit, soften it up, bring it up the bottom end very slightly. But it's the color of this box that it's adding, and I also like this. It's added a bit of density to the mid range and bringing it forward a little bit with that percussion. I really like it. I like what it's doing to top end. So, went a little bit off piece there. Let's go to EQs. Right. So, some things are famous for are, let's go to the Mag EQ. Right. So, this is famous for top end. So, I'll put that on. Okay. And air gain, let's say 2 dB at 20k. Okay, let's listen to that on and off. Okay, so it's nice, but is it nice? Are you sure? Are you not sure if you can't hear the difference? Like, what's the difference between that two dB here? Let's bring it down to 10k. We really hear it? Well, you might be able to hear it if it's a vocal. Do you know what I mean? And it might be different, but again, the copy and the circuitry and any harmonics or anything else to do with this box. So there's some other kind of EQ in there that's making it different to yours straight away. So there's that. The way I would listen is I would get up my Metro KB. I like the Mag EQ, sounds good on. Can you tell the difference? Can you tell the difference? Okay, that's the question you've got to ask yourself. And in the mix, I mean, you can push it more, obviously, but in the mix, can you hear it? I mean, I love what it's doing, but it does feel a little bit more transparent is the word I would possibly use. What do you think? So analog emulations, they are good, specifically compressors. I mean, for me, there's nothing like the analog emulation of the tape machines. I use them all the time on groups and buses. But nowadays, like, I used to use this all the time because I used to hear everyone liking it. And it is really good. And when I'm doing things that are a bit more poppy and I want a bit of top end, I'll go to the things that I've learned in the past. I'll use the Mag EQ or maybe the Millennia for the top EQ and listen which sounds the best and less brittle on the top end. But the thing is in house music, do you need to invest in these kind of EQs, really? Well, I rarely use them anymore. I use Spectre, I use FabFilter Pro Q4. For me, fine. You know, if I had really kind of minimal tracks, I would listen to them both and see which sounds the best. But find the ones that you want. So Mag EQ is really good for top end. So is the Millennia. The bottom end, obviously, is always the Pultec, which you get for a few different people. They're just They're just copied on different boxes. No box is the same. No two Pultecs the same. No two anything, because obviously the circuitry. So that would be on the bottom end. Oh, what's happened there? Yeah, it's not that one I would want to listen to on. It would be the next one, the sub. And one of the reasons why I used this so much back in the day is because I was touring Australia and I was doing a gig with Junior Jack and Kid Cream, and they were saying that they use this. That's why the bass. I said, "Why does your bass sound so good?" They were using a good sample basically, but they had a Pultec, so. Level match. I mean, I'm using my headphones, but this does sometimes on the bass add a certain warmth. But again, nowadays I just use Spectre all the time. But it does have something to it, so I will use that. Because have I used it a million times? Have I used a real one? No. Do I trust the words of really big producers that you see keep using these plugins all the time? Yeah, I do sometimes. And what I'll do, I'll just A/B. I don't just go for one. I'll try that. I'll try a boost on the normal EQ. They're really good because they're adding tone, and sometimes they're adding saturation, which can make you give your sound a bit more body. Okay, so that's the Pultec. What other EQs do I use? The Neves sometimes, they're quite good. I like them around 10K and stuff like that. Different things. You've got to learn them all. And because we don't have that much space, it's like everyone's saying, oh, back in the day they used this, back in the day they used that. It sounded amazing. But I listened back to my mixes when I was using all this gear, and it doesn't sound as good as the mixes that I'm doing now. And I used engineers, right? So for me, and I think dance music, keep yourself a good EQ for Surgical, FabFilter Pro Q4, and for boosting, I use Spectre. I do have a couple of others because I've got the UAD. Just try and get one and try and learn one and use it and A/B it on and off, always level match. And the analog emulations are really good, but can we hear them? Do they actually make a difference in the mix in dance music? Because we've got so much going on, you know, with our drums in particular and everything else. I think my opinion is when you've got less in this track, you can tell a bit of a difference. Can the client tell a difference? Not really. I mostly use analog emulations on my buses and my groups. That's where I hear the difference massively. So yes, that's how I use EQ. That's the analog emulations. Don't just use something like the Pultec on bass because everyone says use the Pultec on bass. If you want to just use your EQ first of all, these are that extra 5%. And they do have a tone, they do have stuff that you'd probably never normally get yourself. So you have to learn these boxes individually. That's EQ. Any questions, anybody? Before we call it a night. That's how I use EQ. It's dead simple. Just to run over it, sample choice, position in the mix is everything. You know, you can't make a bad sound good. But you can take out frequencies, and you've got to learn how to make that judgment when you're choosing samples. EQ, volume control, is your second point of mixing. You know, if you've chosen the right sounds, you won't have a lot of EQing to do, just like in here for choosing some things for the frequency in the mix so they're not clashing with other things. And then I generally just cut and level match. That's all I generally do. Subtraction with the EQ. And then if I think after I've done that, there's certain frequencies, like the bottom of the sound is fitting perfectly but the top isn't, I'll jump to Spectre. I'll get Spectre up, parallel saturation, and EQ it that way. So I'm just boosting the harmonics instead of that. For me, it works. So for bus analog EQ, again, you've just got to learn them. You know, it depends what you're trying to do. The Neve's really good. I think that the compressors are more important. You know, it's hard for me to say. I don't want to say that I know about all these different. I've used the J. I found that the J was really good of the SSL, which is on Plugin Alliance, the one I just showed you then. But I think Spectre. I'm using Spectre all the time because we've got the different frequencies for boosting. And generally on the groups, I don't want to be doing cutting because I've already done that on the individual items. You know, there might be a build-up of something. So if I hear a build-up of like 300 hertz on the group, you know, I won't go onto the group and cut 300 hertz. I'll go into the individual items and EQ them around 300 hertz until I feel like it's better, because I'm doing it in the mix. I'll always do that. I might feel like in general I need a bit of top end, so I might look at the Mag EQ for top end. I might just use Spectre. It is fantastic. It's really good, but it's about what works for you. Any questions before I call it a day? Have a lovely weekend, everybody. Thank you for joining. I hope it helped. I do enjoy doing these. They're off the cuff. We try and get one subject. And yeah, if you're not on my subscription, it's only £10 a month. There's loads more videos coming. If you start, it identifies where most people are getting things wrong, and they're generally the fundamentals. So that's subtonemusicacademy.com. I also do a one-to-one membership where I'm helping people get their records signed or finished. We do it on Zoom. People love it. It's, if you want to sit down and have a chat about whether it's for you, send me an email, info@subtonemusicacademy.com. Thanks very much. I will see you on Monday. I'm going away this weekend. But yeah, you know, remember EQ, you're just boosting the volume in certain frequencies. So it doesn't matter whether you use an EQ8 or a Pro Q4 or whatever it might be, right? But certain things have certain tones. So if I was you and you had a couple of EQs, you wanted to see how they sounded, just try them, try and boost them all the same level like I just showed you, turn them on and off and go through it and go, oh, that really works with my sound. Because I made the mistake of watching loads of videos, listening to lots of people and learning that things were right and, oh, you've got to use this is the best one. There's no rules, but I'm making different music to what them engineers are making. So, you know, can you hear them? Can you not hear them? I found what works for me. Spectre, full text sometimes on bass. Pro Q4. Oh, I sometimes use the Exciter in Ozone. Millennia sometimes for the top end. Mag EQ for the top end. Fresh Air for the top end. That's it. Hope you enjoyed it. Thank you, and I will see you on Monday.